Welcome to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show on Podcast One, broadcasting live from Mordor, the Borg Cube, and Voldemort's lair all at the same time. This show is hosted by Milo Yiannopoulos, the most fabulous supervillain on the internet. Sorry, no offense, but it's true. The Milo Yiannopoulos Show is brought to you by Breitbart.com.
Welcome to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show. I am Tom Sakata. I'm a writer for Breitbart News, and I'm filling in for Milo this week as he is out on the road traveling around to another one of his speaking events. I am blessed to be joined this morning by Breitbart writer Alan Bokhari, and we're going to go through some of the news this morning before Milo joins us after the break with a very special guest. How are you this morning, Alan?
How's it going, Tom? I'm pretty good. What's been happening this week?
This has been a crazy week, and I think we should start off with a story that you wrote. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about it. It came off of a Gizmodo report about Facebook potentially censoring conservative news. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Mark Zuckerberg's been a very naughty boy. Well, not necessarily Mark Zuckerberg, but apparently his employees who manage Facebook's trending news feed. This is sort of like a knockoff of Twitter's trending hashtags. It's supposed to show Facebook users the most popular news stories on the platform. But it turns out, according to anonymous members of Facebook's news team who spoke to Gizmodo, that members of the trending news team have been artificially suppressing conservative news sources and artificially promoting stories that aren't necessarily that popular, stories about pet progressive causes like Black Lives Matter. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, there's no suggestion so far that Mark Zuckerberg is aware of this. And Tom Stocky, who's the manager of Facebook's trending news category, has issued a strong denial that they've done anything. Although, interestingly, Tom Stocky has donated the maximum amount of money you can donate to the Hillary Clinton campaign, so he certainly has his political biases.
Well, the interesting thing to me, it seems like, okay, so they know which stories are actually trending internally on Facebook. But obviously they have to go through and write those little blips for the section that we read. So according to the report, it's a group of Ivy League graduates in their mid-20s who are responsible for handling this. Is that true? Is it led by this Tom Stocky guy?
Yep, it's led by Tom Stocky, and I'm not sure what age the people on the news team are, but I assume quite young. The median age for Silicon Valley companies staff tends to be younger than the average. It's possible that these people don't even know they're being biased towards conservative news sources. I mean, they've been instructed to, filter out spam or irrelevant news stories and things like that. And they're also instructed to filter out news from unreliable sources, much like Wikipedia. And of course, if you're a liberal, you're going to think, well, Breitbart, they're unreliable, right? This is exactly what happens on Wikipedia. Conservative sources tend to get judged as unreliable because, surprise, surprise, young people who edit Wikipedia articles and are part of the tech community tend to be more liberal than the average. So it's possible that's happening. It's also possible that this is basically the old media elites with their biases being replaced by new media elites. I mean, what we're seeing here is essentially that Facebook, which was supposed to be this democratizing force where people decided what's going to be popular, is now turning into a traditional newsroom where the biases of the people in charge of the newsroom affect what people actually see. So it doesn't sound a lot different to Fox News or MSNBC or CNN.
The way I'm understanding it is that this wasn't necessarily a conscious effort. This was more of like a subconscious. These are the things that I think are legitimate and valuable for the trending section.
It's possible. I mean, we don't know. Facebook has denied, deliberately trying to suppress conservative news. That's what they say. But no one really knows. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is someone who had a fit after some anonymous Facebook employees wrote "All Lives Matter" on a company whiteboard, and he was determined to hunt them down. He's gone to Germany and said their immigration policy should be imported to the US. He's attacked Trump for saying we should build a wall. So he's clearly a very progressive person, Mark Zuckerberg. And I used to have this view that there might be rogue progressive elements within these companies like Twitter and Facebook who go after conservatives, but upper management doesn't really know about it. But the more I think about it, the more I think I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg knows how his trending news team is operating. I'm sure he knows the person in charge of it. I'm sure he knows their political biases. And, if he wanted to have a more politically diverse workforce, he could. But I don't think he does want to.
The way it seems, the way that we're hearing about it, it sounds like it is a management failure because they know how this is being structured. They know that this when it's being put in charge of a small group of people who have their own fair biases, it's going to be subject to this kind of failure. So it's a management failure. I don't think they're instructing them to do it, but it sounds like a management failure to me.
Yeah, it's definitely at the very least a management failure. But also, I think, these progressive tech CEOs probably don't really care. I think they're happy that their staff are quietly influencing news in a progressive direction. And I think that's the direction social media companies will go in. It's no longer in the hands of users what's going to be popular on these platforms anymore. It's in the hands of these elites, and these elites are all hyper-progressives.
It's gone a lot farther than just, some stories online about this. One of the Republican senators in Congress actually is kind of asking them to explain. Did you write this story as well? We posted a story on Breitbart about how the Senate is investigating.
The Senate's now going to investigate Facebook over this bias because, and the Republican National Convention came out and condemned Facebook after the Gizmodo story. So, establishment Republicans are really annoyed about this. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this because, once again, it's a gap between what Facebook say they're going to do, be a neutral platform, have no biases affecting their news feeds, and what's, according to the sources in Gizmodo, actually happening in practice. And I expect we'll see more of that from Republicans.
I'm very interested to see how this plays out. I mean, honestly, a private company, I don't know how much they owe. It'd be interesting to see what the answers they kind of provide. But it's interesting, and it's not shocking because when even if you just read the trending sections as a conservative, there's stories that you're interested in that you're seeing elsewhere on Breitbart, elsewhere on the internet that are just not going to appear there. If there's a big Black Lives Matter story, if those stories are there, it's going to be Salon's twist on that story or Slate's twist.
Although at the same time, despite the fact that the trending news category is clearly biased against conservatives, ordinary users can still post what they want on their own walls, and Breitbart is still, I think, the 25th most popular it's in the top 25 most popular news sources on Facebook.
Breitbart is the 14th most shared news source on Facebook.
That's
really incredible.
There you go, despite the alleged trending bias.
So, Breitbart, we do okay on Facebook. So, but there are problems in it. It's going to be interesting to see how this develops. So I'm sure we'll write more about this on Breitbart so people keep checking it.
What else has been happening this week?
This was not the hugest story, but we covered it and people really liked it. A video done by the Young America's Foundation. They went around and they interviewed students at George Washington University to ask them whether or not they believe that America is exceptional. And it was... I wasn't shocked by the video, but one of the most revealing things about this little clip was that most of the students implied that their perspective on whether or not America is exceptional had been shaped by their professors.
Well, that's not surprising.
Did you see this one?
I did. This obviously I'm British, so this America being exceptional, you'll have to explain that to me because lots of countries are exceptional in their own way. Japan has exceptional fetishes. Syria has exceptional suicide bombers. So in what way do you think people traditionally assume America was exceptional?
When I think of it, there's a clip in the article up on Breitbart if people want to check it out, where actually, of all people, Bono from U2 talks about American exceptionalism, talks kind of this, how, America was founded on this unique, rugged individualism, where people were told, if you put yourself and your family first, that's how society's going to be the strongest. It was a very unique American idea. But there's actually, and we do a lot, or I'm coming out with a piece in a little while about some of the craziest writings from social justice warriors in academia. There's a lot of academic writing now about how individualism itself is one of the main causes of racism. It's one of the main causes of chaos and horribleness in America.
Yes, I've seen this as well. I mean, when Martin Luther King, was around in the 60s, he always argued from a very individualist American perspective. There's no race but the human race. He made statements like that, and now these sort of principles are being denounced as racist. It's incredible.
So that's what you have all of these. You have these professors at universities across America who say this American foundation on we're going to give you the maximum amount of personal freedom. That's racist. That's imperialist. It's going to lead to all of these horrible kinds of oppression. And it's not acceptable in the classroom anymore. So these kids, when they're asked, is America exceptional? No, it's not, because it's an oppressive society. It was built on oppressive ideas, and I don't even think they fully understand what's going on. I don't mean to sound condescending, but I don't think they do. I mean, did you see this clip?
Yeah, I did. I mean, like you said, it's interesting that they said it came from professors. So, they got all these young, impressionable kids who are essentially being indoctrinated into a hyper-progressive myth about America and freedom being this terrible, oppressive thing. It's amazing. They're being indoctrinated in a political perspective. They're not learning things.
It'd be one thing if you had, you went from one class and the professor was going to say, oh, America is this horrible, oppressive land, imperialists, and then you had another professor who was on the other side and was going to give you that American exceptionalist perspective. But that's not what's happening. It's all of the same.
Or, I know it sounds incredible, but what about a professor who looks at both sides and thinks, here's some of the bad stuff America's done, here's some of the great stuff America's done. Is that impossible?
Right, and that's... Those professors exist, but they're few and far between. Another thing that was interesting from this video, and then we'll move on, is that one of the students suggested that his perspective on American exceptionalism was shaped by the first scene of the first episode of Aaron Sorkin's HBO series, The Newsroom. Have you seen that show?
I've seen one episode. I don't think it was Aaron Sorkin's strongest show, frankly. I like The West Wing.
Well, West Wing is good, but Sorkin, who's a longtime Democrat. Anyway, this scene is the main character is a news anchor, answers this very naively portrayed college student comes up to him and says, sir, can you tell me why America is exceptional? And he goes, after a little while, he goes, it's not, we're 7th in world literacy rates. He goes down this whole list of how America's declining in various global rankings. And, it's kind of like, this Aaron Sorkin, who wrote the show, is a longtime Democratic donor, long time, 15, 20 years. It's kind of like implying, like, this, free market America that we all thought was the greatest thing in the world, it's failed. Look at how it's failed us. Which it's really ironic because every year since 1936, we've added more pages to the Federal Register of Regulations. Every single year we add more regulations than the year before. So the America that's declining in various global rankings has coincided with this consistent expansion of government.
And, which is a betrayal of the original American ideals, which was to, a night watchman government that didn't intrude too much in people's personal lives.
Exactly. So, I mean, bottom line, they're not getting the full picture. There's a lot going on the college students aren't getting, and they're coming out more so right now as mirrors of their professors and everything else.
That student sounds a bit similar to Donald Trump, that, America's declining, we need to make it great again.
Yeah, I don't think that student was heading in that direction.
I'm actually coming around to John McAfee, who's going to be on the program next. I think he's got a fighting chance.
I'm a big McAfee guy.
He owns 10 guns, which I think is more guns than Donald Trump owns. I think I might just leave McAfee.
He's certainly interesting. I think you guys are going to be interested in hearing him in a few minutes. Milo will be back after the break, and we'll have John McAfee as well. So it's going to be a great end of the show. We have like 2 more stories before we head into the break. This is I'm actually not sure how to pronounce this guy's name, but I read his book that he published 20 years ago. Did you write this story as well about Peter Thiel being named as the Trump delegate?
This was one of mine, but I did read the story. And, this is interesting. Obviously, Peter Thiel is a well-known, well-respected libertarian as well as an extremely successful entrepreneur. He's also openly gay, although, he's not part of the whole progressive LGBT movement, naturally.
This guy's very interesting. I read this book because it's the area that I'm interested in. 20 years ago, he published a book called The Diversity Myth about political correctness and multiculturalism on campus. And this was 20 years ago before this stuff was, and he just nailed it. I mean, that's kind of a side of it, but he's kind of in this he gets all of this stuff that we're doing. So this didn't surprise me.
He's been talking and writing about this stuff for a long time. He's written all sorts of stuff for, I think, the Cato Institute. He's very well respected in libertarian circles, and he really gets the cultural stuff as well. Like you said, the campus stuff, the political correctness stuff. And it doesn't surprise me he's a Trump delegate, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to try to get him on the podcast because Milo, is in love now. So hopefully he'll be on here eventually.
I think Milo probably fell in love with TL when he read that famously controversial essay in which he suggested women shouldn't get the vote.
Where did he publish that?
That was on the Cato Institute, I believe.
Okay, that's pretty funny. Let's move on to our last story, and then we'll come back with after the break with John McAfee. Did you see this last story that I sent you this week?
Was this about the fat activists?
Yes.
Yes, fatism is this new idea that if you tell fat people to lose weight and start eating healthier, then you're a horrible fattist and you're oppressing them.
This is like my favorite thing is social justice right now, because it's that crazy.
It's simultaneously funny and horrifying because, as Milo pointed out on Twitter a few days ago, is basically instructing young people, especially young girls, that they don't look after their health, they're going to be all right, and anyone who tells them to look after their health is oppressing them. I mean, that's a really poisonous message for young people.
No, I mean, it really is. I mean, the story was a fat activist who gave a lecture at the University of Minnesota, and she suggested that anti-fat culture is similar to rape culture.
Was this Trigglypuff? Was it different?
No, it was a different fat activist.
Okay.
There's more than one.
Right, so she said anti-fat culture is similar to rape culture. So what's the point that you're raping her with words whenever you suggest that she should go on a diet? Something like that.
Yeah, that's honestly the suggestion.
We live in the most hilarious times.
Well, I mean, it's bonkers. I mean, they're talking about intersectional fat activism.
Like, has politics ever been more entertaining? I mean, we've got Donald Trump and John McAfee in the same presidential race. We've got activists on campus saying if you call them fat, you're as bad as a rapist. You've got students going to therapy sessions because they heard something that they disagreed with. I mean, politics just seems to be getting more and more hilarious.
I don't know how we come back from this. I mean, it's interesting and that's fun. But I mean, like this article here this is from Heat Street. They're talking about intersectional fat activism, which basically means, is there room for women of color in the fat activism movement?
In intersectional fat activism. So if you're like a lesbian paraplegic, from I don't know, from Tanzania, and you're also really fat, then is that like, oh, and you're a Muslim, like, is that like all the oppression cards? I mean, have I missed anything?
Yeah, well, they feel like they need to look out for people that are in other oppressed groups and make sure they're being fairly represented in their oppression movements.
Wow, so soon what we're going to start seeing is like white fat people going to war with black fat people. So that's what happened in feminism. We had this whole war between so-called, privileged white feminists and intersectional feminists.
Well, that's what they're saying right here. It says, is there room for women of color in the fat movement? That's what this fat activist said at University of Minnesota.
Amazing.
I don't understand it, but I mean...
Well, that's the left for you. They always eat their own, and I suppose especially in the case of fat activists.
It's with that, we're going to head into break, but after the break, we have John McAfee, the founder of McAfee Antivirus Security System. He founded a multi-billion-dollar industry in antivirus software. The media always likes to go after him and get more drama out of him than necessary, but he really is a very principled libertarian. Incredible life story. Just listen to him talk. It's incredible. Milo will be back after the break. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me and Alan this morning. I've been Tom Sakata from Breitbart News. Hope you guys have a great day.
There's something about TrueCar a lot of people don't know. Using TrueCar can also help you buy a used car. In fact, there are over 500,000 pre-owned vehicles available from TrueCar certified dealers nationwide. Whether you are looking to buy new or used, you can get upfront pricing information that discounts off the list price for used cars and a better buying experience through our TrueCar certified dealer network. You'll see what other people paid for the car you want, so you can know what a fair price is and feel confident. With TrueCar, you can connect with a local certified dealer of your choosing, so you can enjoy a quick, easy buying experience. Using the TrueCar website or the TrueCar app, you can easily find the new or used car you want. When you're ready to buy a new or used car, visit TrueCar.com or download the TrueCar app to enjoy a better car buying experience. Some features are not available in all states.
It's the podcast with political analysis as rigorous as my daily hair care routine. Welcome back to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show on Podcast One. Welcome back to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show. I am here with, I think, a scoundrel, a mischief maker, and an engine of chaos, and somebody addicted to spectacle. It is John McAfee. How are you, sir?
Well, I am fine. I'm fine. I'm no longer really addicted to spectacle. It's merely a hobby of mine.
It does seem to follow you everywhere you go. Mr. McAfee, very happy to have you. Now, John is an American computer programmer, a businessman, and a 2016 Libertarian Party presidential candidate. By now, most people know his name. He is the developer of, I think, the first commercial antivirus program, which bore the McAfee brand name for a long time. His wealth peaked at 100 million. He has interest in smartphone apps, yoga, and all natural antibiotics. He resided for a number of years in Belize, but after disputes meets with the authorities there and in Guatemala. He returned to the United States in 2013, and now he's running for president. Despite his southern accent, the bleach blonde and goateed businessman is in fact half British. He's the son of an Englishwoman who met an American soldier stationed in the UK during World War II, and he says that he feels as British as he does American. So listeners can hear two transatlantic personalities discuss the vagaries of the presidential campaign this year. Before we get into all of that, before we find out why you want to run for president and what you think of the political landscape in America, I just, for those couple of people who aren't as familiar with you because they're from the world of politics or they're not really tech people, tell us a little bit about your background. As I understand it, you started the first commercial antivirus software, and then you've done some interesting things since, haven't you? You've offered to help the FBI crack into the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone, all sorts of things like that. How involved in technology are you still, or have you sort of moved on out of it?
I'm probably more involved with technology now than I ever have been. I was trained as a mathematician a long time ago, and my first job out of graduate school was with General Electric as a programmer trainee. They didn't have computer science classes back then. The computers were brand new to the world. And from that moment on, I have lived and breathed everything about computers. I got into security very early on when I worked for NASA. That was in 1971, I think, and I've been in security ever since, computer security. The world we live in today, it's impossible for anyone to avoid interacting with computers and software. The automobile that you drive is controlled entirely by computer. Soon our refrigerators and our toasters. Samsung released a television set last year with a computer in it that actually listens to what you're saying in the room and then sends all of that data to some third party. They have a warning about it in the manual. Your smartphone, the power of the computing in your smartphone is greater than the largest supercomputer back in 1971. The entire world is a world of digital science, cyber science, interconnected communications. The router that connects to your cable modem is a computer. The modem itself is a computer. All of our mobile devices are computers. So software and digital science pervade the entire world. And people are largely unaware of what the risks of this truly are.
Let's talk a little bit about those risks. And I want to ask two questions. First of all, sort of global security, terrorism question. And second, I want to ask you about privacy and free speech. You have a deep and excellent knowledge of just how connected the world is and how reliant on technology the world is now. Are you worried that governments are never going to be able to keep up with bad actors, whether it's with ISIS or whether it's Chinese hackers or whether it's, anybody else? It's very difficult, isn't it, these days for us to really understand exactly what's happening when we're on the computer or we're making phone calls or whatever. There's so much going on in the background processes doing this, information being sent to companies here, there, and everywhere. I mean, just how bad is it out there? I mean, it just seems so terrifying for everybody to, that we don't really understand the way the world works anymore. We don't understand what's happening when we're going about doing our, whether it's financial transactions or we're talking to people. There's so much going on in the background, going to private corporations and the government. What are the big risks for people?
First of all, I'd like to address your first comment, which is, how do we protect ourselves from bad actors, if the government cannot keep up? Governments have never kept up with bad actors. I mean, prior to electronic communication, prior to telephones even, bad actors would meet in alleyways at night, in dark rooms. They would send each other notes that were in code of some sort. This has been a problem since the beginning of time. That the fact that two criminals or terrorists or whatever could have written a note to each other in a code, where certain words mean different things, or every letter add 3 to it, and that's the real letter. That did not give the government the right to open all of our mail, did it? No, it did not. And now that we have moved from writing notes and whispering into ears into a world where I can send an encrypted communication to my wife about something personal, does not now suddenly give the government the right to have a master key to listen in on every conversation or to read every email or every text message. This is the fallacy in the thinking that's happening within our government. The case with the FBI and Apple, for example, the FBI had a phone that it wanted to get into. Well, there are many ways to do that. They chose to ask Apple for a master key that would unlock every phone remotely. This is absurd in the extreme. On the other side, the bad actors have great capability today to do anything that they want. If you have a smartphone and you've downloaded more than 10 apps, I promise you that one of those apps is spying on you. And you can check it yourself. If you're running Android, go into your settings, look at the application manager, and then read the permissions that you have granted to that application. Virtually all Bible reading applications, for an example. Now, Bible reading apps are, if you want to listen to the book of Genesis at night and your eyes are tired, you run the app and it reads it out loud to you. Well, all it needs is access to your speaker on your phone. But many of them request access to your emails, your text messages, your contacts, and you give them permission to send all of this information to unnamed third parties. We ourselves agree to these things every time you say, this app is asking these permissions, is that okay? Nobody reads them. It's a nice free app. You just say, yes, of course. But think about it. I mean, didn't your mother and father ever tell you that there is nothing free in life? And if you're downloading an app which some of these cost many millions of dollars to develop, and it's free, well, there's just something wrong with that logic. It's not free. What you are paying is a reduction in your privacy. End of story. And some of these apps, by the way, many of them are just wanting to know where you are, what you're doing, what color shoes you buy, so that the next time you log on to Facebook, they can put an ad up saying, brown loafers for sale at your local store. But some of them are written by people in foreign countries that get in, access your bank account information, your credit card information, or even your social security number, if you ever did type that into your phone, and steal your actual identity, in which case you're pretty well screwed for a long time.
Are you more worried about private corporations or the government? Because in the conversation we've had so far, you've talked about the overreach of government into personal privacy, and then you spoke in similar terms about overreaching by private corporations, by startups, by technology companies. I suppose the question is, are you more worried about the federal government or Google?
You mean federal government or companies?
Well, yes. I mean, speaking about Google as analogous for the tech industry, privately held tech companies.
This brings up a very, very important question. In America, in many cases, it is hard to distinguish between a large corporation and our government. I mean, think about it. Google, for example, that owns all of the information in the world. Literally. I mean, anything that's happened in the past 10 years is on Google. Fact of life. Google and the U.S. government cooperate enormously. I mean, the federal government has hired numerous Google executives. Google cooperates with the government in accessing private information. So what is Google? What is our government? Dwight Eisenhower warned us about this. By the way, are you in England? Do you have a British accent?
Well, I'm British, yeah. I spend most of my time in America, but I was born in Britain, yeah.
If it's an American audience listening,
mostly,
then you will know who Dwight Eisenhower was. It was our president during the 1950s after the great Second World War. When he left office, he warned us about something that was very important, that we were teetering on the edge of a cliff. And he called it the military-industrial complex. That is, and the impact or control over the government by that complex. And we have gone way, way beyond that. It's not just Boeing and Lockheed making airplanes or shipbuilders making aircraft carriers. It's gotten into every aspect of our life. And I hate to say this, but if you think clearly about the relationship between big business and government and the way that politics works in Washington, it's difficult to distinguish who is who. But let's assume there is a clear distinction. I'm far more worried about the government, far more. Because if Google or Facebook or Twitter is spying on me. And they're probably spying on me just to sell me something. What color shoes do you like? What color sweaters do you like? What size shirt do you have? How old are you? What are your interests? Where do you eat? And you can choose not to buy. If it is a government spying on you, it is a far more insidious situation. Because why are they doing this? Is it because we are the enemy? Or because they think we might be the enemy? When they go through TSA, for example, they say, we're here to protect you. Okay, fine. Now, take off your shoes, take off your belt, put your hands in the air. We're going to frisk you. Meanwhile, while we're frisking you, all of your personal belongings are going to be closely scrutinized. And that doesn't feel like protection to me. I mean, that feels like entering prison.
Yes.
Or at the very least, it feels like I am the enemy.
It certainly can feel like that at airports. I understand your analysis. I think I probably agree with the vast majority of it. Your answer to this is to run for president because you would like to fix some of these problems. Tell me what led you to return to the United States and what prompted you to start a campaign for president. How did this happen?
Well, I never left the United States. I had a home in Belize. I was not a Belizean citizen or anything else. I had a home. In fact, I had a number of homes there for about 5 years. It's a beautiful country. I love the ocean. It has the second largest offshore barrier reef in the world, meaning I could keep my boats right in front of my house, which I did. I love fishing. I love scuba diving and snorkeling. It was spectacular. However, it is a third world country that's highly corrupt. And I knew this. I never realized what the personal impact might be. I moved into the jungle because I was doing research on antibiotics using native plants, using a new technology called quorum sensing. It's where we figured out that bacteria actually communicate with one another. So I've been coming and going to the jungle for about a year when the local politician or one of his representatives came to me and said, why don't you donate $2 million to the government for our next election? In exchange, we'll give you 100,000 acres of property along the New River. We'll give you tax breaks, et cetera, et cetera. I said, no, I think I'm not interested. A week later, 42 armed soldiers stormed my property, shot my dog in front of my eyes, destroyed $500,000 worth of my property and left. The following day, that same representative came back and said, oh my God, I'm so sorry, what a terrible mistake. By the way, have you reconsidered your donation? I said, get the F off my property.
Incredible.
And that began a war of words. I have pretty good access to the press, and the longer I go without talking to the press, the easier it is to talk to them. So I immediately went to the international press, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and told my story. I said, look, good God, this happened to me. All I wanted was an apology from the Prime Minister and restitution for the property that they had destroyed. Instead, a war of words began, and it ended. And by the way, during this time, tourism was dropping dramatically in Belize, which is its prime source of income, other than the drugs that the Prime Minister the ministers deal in, and human trafficking and money laundering. But it's a huge source of income, and that had dropped dramatically. They couldn't do anything to me overtly. They couldn't just arrest me. I was doing nothing wrong. In October of 2012, my neighbor was shot dead in the middle of the night. I'm to this day convinced that the Belizean government was responsible. All white people look alike in San Pedro, and he was my next door neighbor. So I think that, I truly believe this. I truly believe that they shot the wrong person.
I see.
The following day, they came to question everybody, neighbors and so on, including me. Well, frequently in Belize, questioning involves stringing you upside down by your heels, putting a football helmet on your head, and beating it with a baseball bat until your brains turn to mush. There's no scars, there's no bruises. You end up as an idiot. I wasn't feeling like doing that day. So I went underground. The rest of the story is well known.
Talk to me about your objectives in running for president. Talk to me about what it is that you want to remind people of? Many candidates for president who don't have the backing of a big party behind them, they're not Republicans or Democrats, run because they want to influence the direction of the race. And some people say that Donald Trump has done this, although of course he's running as a Republican, but sort of at the beginning, people didn't know if he was going to run independent or not. They thought he was trying to, nudge the immigration issue. Now he's turned out to be the Republican nominee. He's in a slightly different position. But candidates who don't have the backing of those big parties, who don't have a realistic prospect of becoming president, do this because they want to remind people of things or they want to influence the race in a particular way. How do you want to influence the election this year?
Now, keep in mind, I am in fact running within the Libertarian Party, and even though the Libertarians have never won a presidential election, they do have ballot access in all 50 states, which is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do here in America. So don't discount me right off the box, but let's assume you're right, and all I can do is make a statement. Here is the biggest problem. We live in a world of cyber science, and it is absolutely not understood by anyone within our government. We are spied on by the NSA using cyber science, by the FBI. They're collecting metadata about everybody and everything. Databases are being built that can almost predict our behavior day by day. This is horrifying to me. It is horrifying. It is leading us right into 1984, the novel by George Orwell. So no one's talking about it. I mean, people talk about it, but no one's really wanting to do anything about it. Our government seems completely incompetent in understanding the implications of single acts, like building software to access everybody's iPhone. Well, I understand these things, and I see where this is going, and it's not going in a good direction. The other candidates seem to be completely oblivious. Donald Trump is proud of the fact that he's never sent an email, and Hillary Clinton thinks that wiping a disk means taking a damp cloth and wiping it. I mean, seriously, we are trying to elect somebody who does not understand the fundamental glue which holds the entire world together. All of our communications, all of our actions, our automobiles, they have great capabilities, but also great risks. In November of last year, Wired magazine published a story about one of its reporters who was cooperating with two hackers. From 1,000 miles away, they hacked into his Jeep and took full control of it, ran him off the road. This is something that's easy to do. So we're building all of these functions and all of these facilities, and they're all interconnected. And we're not thinking about the implications to the society as a whole and to the safety of individuals. And if somebody doesn't step in and change things, we're going to be in a world of hurt, because somebody's going to take charge eventually of this massive database of knowledge of everything, knowledge of every member of the populace and what they think and who they meet with and what they say. And what is the fundamental thing that all dictators search for? Isn't it knowledge, absolute knowledge of the citizens? And that's where we're headed. And I don't want that in the hands of the government. I don't want it in the hands of anyone. And yet we can still progress, build, create facilities, add new features without adding the risk if we just think a little bit beforehand. And so this is fundamentally why I do not want the world to turn into 1984, where truth is what the government says it is. And it may change from day to day. I don't know if you've read that book, but I recommend that everybody read that book and then ask yourself, is that not where we're headed? Because that society was, in George Orwell's mind, the most gray, drab, horrifying society imaginable. And, I have children and grandchildren, and we owe our children something, surely. We have to fight. We have to stand up. We have to do something else. Our inaction will create a nightmare world for our children.
He's a presidential candidate, a libertarian, a tech expert, and has been telling us, I think, very powerfully and very persuasively just how pervasive technology is in our lives and how potentially dangerous it is, that the amount of information available, the number of data points that these companies, whether it's Google or Facebook or Twitter, and the government too, have about all of us, the lack of distinction these days in this sort of late capitalist intricate symbiosis that we have between Google and Twitter and Facebook and the government. And we certainly see that in Germany, for instance, where Facebook is censoring what people can say about the immigration crisis. And, you've got Zuckerberg and Merkel teaming up over there. Your understanding of libertarianism is it's a persuasive one. I want to ask you a couple of practical questions first, which is, let me ask you a question about the proper limits of government. You've explained very eloquently your understanding of the risks of too much information in too few hands. But what are some of the other things you would do if you were elected president, if the Libertarian Party were to rise, perhaps as a result of the Republicans being fractured by Donald Trump's candidacy? The Libertarian Party would start to become a force in American politics. Flesh out your positions a little further. I mean, for instance, would you abolish any large government departments that are there now?
First, let me talk a bit about what the true problems are.
Sure.
Let's look at some of our most expensive projects here in America, war on drugs being among them. We spent trillions trying to interdict and stop people from using illegal drugs. It has done nothing. It has not changed in one way the use of illegal drugs by American citizens. What it has done is fill our prisons with non-violent citizens while simultaneously creating the largest, most brutal, and powerful organization in the world. That is the Sinaloa cartel, who have killed millions, tortured millions of others, dismembered people, done horrific acts. That cartel exists solely because we have criminalized the use of drugs. Now, as libertarians, we believe that what you do with your body and with your mind is your business, that you own your body, not the government. That if I choose to be a vegetarian, that's my choice, and I will eat nothing but vegetables. If I choose to be vaccinated, I'll get vaccinated. If I choose not to, I won't. If I want to smoke weed, I will do that. If I don't, I won't. And the same thing with any drug, even something as horrific as heroin. The heroin addiction is its own punishment. We don't need to punish you anymore. And trying to stop you is not going to work. You're just going to find it illegally on the streets through a friend, which is what's happening now. So all of these trillions of dollars have created suffering by putting nonviolent citizens in prison and creating the drug cartels and nothing more. Surely this can't be good. I mean, the government says we are doing good. We are trying to get drugs off the streets. It has not worked. In the 1930s, it was illegal to possess or to drink alcohol. It created the largest consumption of alcohol in the history of this country. Speakeasies created, and it also created organized crime. It did not work. You cannot legislate what a person wants to do with their body because they're going to do it anyway. I mean, fundamental religious organizations have discovered this over and over and over by insisting that you do not have sex before marriage. Well, the rate of unmarried births are identical to societies where they go, we don't care. It's all right. Just be careful. So you just can't do it. Legislation will not stop a person from doing what they want to do with their body. And the same thing with their mind. For a while, it was illegal in parts of America to possess or to teach Darwin's Origin of Species because it implied that we came from monkeys, which offended some people. But ideas have a life of their own and simply cannot be extinguished. So these are the things we believe. So among other things, I would, because executive branch is limited in many of its capacities, it cannot create laws and it must abide by them. But one of the things the executive branch can do is set the drug schedule. That is, the schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the worst being 5, 4, things like heroin and so on. Set them all to 0. The president can do that. And the Drug Enforcement Administration reports through the executive branch. These people can be applied more productively elsewhere. I don't know doing what, but certainly
maybe in the
it's
private
an
sector.
easy task. They would make great bodyguards. They're all excellent shots. I mean, I'm serious about it. Would be easy for them to find employment in the private sector. Another thing that the president can do is pardon people. Now, it may take a while to sign all the papers, but I would pardon every non-violent drug offender currently serving time in federal prisons. Because these people need to get back to work. They got to get back to their families. They need to be responsible, productive people. Just because you smoke weed, and some people are in prison, federal prison, for possessing a single joint for 15 years. This is not rational. This is not helpful. And who is it helping? Not helping me, you, or anybody. And it's certainly not helping the family of the person who's in prison. So that would be another thing. The third thing, which would be very simple to do, is we have been the world's policemen for 50 years. No one asked you to do that. We did it on our own volition because we could. We had the atomic bombs, the battleships, the stealth bombers, all of the sophisticated weaponry. So no one could stop us from being the world's policemen. The result of this has been we are universally disliked. I have traveled the world extensively, and Americans are the least likable people on the planet, according to the locals where you're visiting. Well, of course we are. We were running around beating people with clubs and dropping bombs from drones. We are involving ourselves in the affairs of foreign nations where we have no understanding of the truth of the situation. We are gullible and naive. I mean, think about it. America is less than 300 years old. When my ancestors were living in caves and wearing bearskins, the Chinese were weaving silk, reciting poetry, and playing complex musical instruments. Now, do you think that we understand that society? No. The Chinese call us gaijin, meaning barbarians. Why? Because we are, in comparison to a society with a written history that goes back 6,000 years and a culture another 5. So we've got to stop doing that. So I would bring home the majority of our overseas troops because we have no business giving military aid to sides where we have no concept what the cultural, political, religious implications of these sides are. You know, when we got into Afghanistan, opium farmers would say, "Oh, this guy across the valley is a terrorist, and he's done this and this and this," and so the Americans would go and collect him and execute him, only to find out later that no, he wasn't. He was merely a competitor to the gentleman that wanted him that we moved. We just have no business being there. We have problems here at home. I don't know if anybody's noticed. I have. Bring them home.
I think that's something that many listeners are going to find very persuasive. I want to ask you about a subject that my audience is particularly invested in, and that's free speech. And I want to ask you about,
free speech?
Yes, about freedom of academic inquiry and freedom of thought and speech. You've touched on this slightly. I'd like to understand your assessment of free speech in America today. I speak a lot on college campuses and report a lot about the pressures placed on free speech by the progressive left. It seems to me that if in the 90s the religious right were clamping down on free speech and clamping down on art and culture, trying to censor and to punish on ideological lines, today it's the sort of wacky social justice warriors and the feminists and whatnot. What's your assessment of the state of free speech in America today? Is it under threat? Is it fine? Am I blowing things out of proportion? Or are there serious risks to what we can say, think, and do in America today?
I believe, for example, that if I were to take a loudspeaker and get a permit to speak on a street corner and read out loud our Declaration of Independence, specifically the paragraph that states that when a government stops serving the people have the right to change it or even abolish it, then I would be arrested for treason, or I'd be arrested for some offense, I promise you, by reading our Declaration of Independence. Now, if you doubt me, you should read that declaration because it gives people the power. Do people have power in this country? What power do you have? I have very little. The government tells me what I can and cannot do, what's right, what's wrong. It tells me that I must, through the sweat of my brow, create income and give them a percentage. It has the right to invade my home without knocking, providing they think that they want to do that or should do that or they don't like me. No, I think free speech is disappearing along with all of our freedoms. And it's got to stop. Again, look at the average. If you travel, so you go through TSA every day, they're saying, we're protecting you. But what are they really doing? They're saying, what we are doing is ensuring you that you are not the enemy we're trying to protect you from. Think of the insanity of this. Homeland Security, the FBI demanding access into our phones, the NSA not even demanding, but simply doing it. Harris Corporation in Melbourne, Florida, creating a device called a Stingray that every police agency in this country has that can listen to every cell phone conversation within a half-mile radius. My God, do we have any freedoms? And certainly our freedom of speech is being limited. You know, I'm probably the most outspoken critic of certain parts of our government of anyone in America, certainly the FBI and the NSA. And I know for a fact that my phone is tapped constantly. If I buy a new phone, within 24 hours, they have managed to plant software on it. And trust me, I would know these things. This is my business. This is not right. There's something fundamentally wrong with a government that was designed to serve the people, turning into our mother, our father, and our boss, all rolled into one. It's got to stop. It's got to be reversed. The government has the right to invade your privacy and demand that you tell them everything you're doing, but you try to demand of the government everything they're doing. Where can I go, knock on a door and say, what have you done with my tax dollars? I want to see where every dollar went. No, you're not going to get it. You're not. You're going to get audited, that's for sure.
That certainly does seem to happen. All right. What are the first three things you would do on your first day in the Oval Office?
Step one is whatever the law allows a president to do in terms of getting information, I would find out what's really happening behind this curtain. Because the government exists behind a curtain of secrecy. I'd like to know, first of all, what's really going down here before I decide to change something. Because really, you don't know. I don't know. All we know is those snippets of disinformation that they tell us. How did we find out that the NSA was spying on us? The government didn't come and say, oh, by the way, folks, we've got to tell you last week, we've been spying on you. No, someone had to blow the whistle. Edward Snowden had to step forward and risk his future to tell us, look, people, there's something illegal happening here. And then the government declares him an enemy of the state, someone that needs to be dealt with, put away. But my God, he told the American citizens the truth about what we needed to know. So how do I know what's really going on, or you, until I get there and say, now, you tell me exactly what's happening. Where are we spending our tax dollars, and why? And on and on and on. So that would be step one. Step two, I'd already said, I would start signing pardon forms immediately for all nonviolent drug offenders in federal prisons. I would meet with the Pentagon and say, look, we need to find a use for these soldiers that are overseas here in the States. Surely we have problems that need to be addressed, and we don't need to be addressing them in Afghanistan and the Middle East or anywhere in the world. Not unless we happen to be overrun or attacked or bombed by one of these countries, then we, of course, have to deal with it. But we actively seek out nations to interfere with for purely economic reasons. I would meet with the members of Congress and say, this is who I am. I am going to strongly fight for what I believe in and see if I can't shame them publicly. by allowing America to degenerate to the state that it currently is.
You've given a very powerful and persuasive reason, I think, for people to consider voting outside of the two major parties. And certainly many of my listeners and many Breitbart readers will have heard a lot to like in what you've said to me. Before, unfortunately, we have to wrap up, I'd just like to get your impressions of the two nominees for the major parties. And I suppose I'll ask the question in a slightly childish way, but which out of Hillary and Trump do you consider the most distasteful, and why?
Here's the issue. First of all, I think that what we have done far too long in this country is choose the lesser of two evils. But listen, the lesser of two evils is still evil. So you're asking me to decide whether, let's say, I would choose one over the other. It's like, would you rather have a bladder infection or the measles? I'm being very serious here, gentlemen, because that's actually the truth of what's happening. I would stand up and say, look, aren't we supposed to be helping? Don't we want something to help us? And you're saying that now in this election, I must either get this disease or that disease. Please, people, wake up, accept the truth, and then do something about it. Vote libertarian. Vote libertarian.
Thank you so much for that. It's been a fascinating conversation. I wish we could speak for longer. I know that lots of people are going to have been energized and inspired by that to reconsider the options for the election. So thank you so much for joining me, John. And yeah.
Don't get this under $20. It's $20 an hour.
Your rates are very reasonable. Very reasonable. I used to wear a t-shirt in college that said, 100, well, it was pounds because I was in England, £100 plus taxi. And it took about 6 months to work out what it meant. And eventually I got hauled into the principal's office saying, "Are you prostituting yourself on campus?" I said, "No, I just thought it was funny."
I love it. Well, it's been fun talking to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Your $20 is on the way. And I've been Milo Yiannopoulos. You're listening to The Milo Yiannopoulos Show. You've been listening to The Milo Yiannopoulos Show, the podcast that launched 1,000 therapy sessions for triggered snowflakes. Thanks for tuning in, and please do subscribe on iTunes, leave us a comment, a rating, whatever you like. Our producer is Tom Secotto. Our researchers are Will Ross and Michael Poole. Our resident German, Mark Geppert, ensures the trains run on time, and our sound engineer, John Fitch, can be found at sturbridgesound.com. Download new episodes of The Milo Yiannopoulos Show at podcast1.com, and you can also listen to us at Breitbart. Thank you. That was so interesting.
Well, good.
I'm kind of
when will this come out?
So this is going to come out on Friday. I'm kind of I like Trump. You know, I like Trump because I like the engine of chaos sort of aspect to him. I like the middle finger up to the progressive establishment. I love the whole Trump train spectacle. But I think your politics are pretty close to where I sit if I were not being intoxicated by his aura and ego and charisma.
Well, thank you for that partial endorsement.
There we go. I'm not sure what that says about me. Like, if I wasn't a homosexual wrapped up in the machismo and bravado of Donald Trump, I'd probably want to vote for you. Listen, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, John. Okay. Thanks for talking to me.
You're welcome.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay tuned for 60-second AP News headlines.